Hello and welcome. My name is Odera Onu. I haven't done live for a while, and I think what I'm going to do today is to turn off the comments if I know how to actually do that. Okay. So I'm going to turn off the comments because I don't want to have people distracting me on this live. So just bear with me. All right. So I've turned off the comments. So like I said in the little video I did today in the afternoon, I'm going to tell a story of Nigeria's history. And I'm going to be looking at the book In Biafra, Africa Died, The Diplomatic Plot. And this book is written by Emefiena Ezeani, right? Now I'm going to look at the chapter 2 of this book. There's the foreword, there's the introduction. The chapter 1 is basically the brief history of Nigeria. And obviously, let me just, start from the chapter 1. It says, a brief history of Nigeria. Before the year 1914, there was no country in the world known by the name Nigeria. On the other hand, for hundreds of years, there existed within the geographical space known today as Nigeria peoples and nations, and identified as Yoruba, Igbo, Tiv, Benin, etc. Asholuonu, 2009. Traces, for example, the unknown and lost history of the people of Igbo extraction all the way to 500,000 to 1 million BC. And notes, French paleontologists working in the Chad Basin have dated the Igbo earliest known ancestors to 7 million BC, which is before Christ. After hundreds of years of Arab and European slavery and colonization, these and other nearby nations were amalgamated by the British government through the instrumentality of Frederick Lugard, written by Crowder in 1966. Nigeria as a political and social entity has therefore two main histories. The history of the different peoples who make up the country and the history of Nigeria as one political entity. The former form of history of the peoples and their empires or nations of states is very old, some going back hundreds of years. See appendices 2 and 3, the ancient maps of Africa. So if you read the book, there are in the appendices the proofs of the referenced materials on this book, and this historical book or research. Historically, says Abu 2004, indigenous societies antedated Nigeria, and this consisted of the three largest ethnic groups, the Hausa Fulani in the north, the Igbo in the southeast, and the Yoruba in the southwest, and each of which now has a population of not less than 20 million. So the major tribes of Nigeria have nothing less than 20 million people, each of them. The later history is quite recent. The political state known today as Nigeria was born in 1914. Flora Shaw, mistress to Frederick Lugard, coined the name Nigeria area in 1897 in the article she wrote in the Times of January that year, Shaw's 1968. This was 3 years before Lugard had joined a British firm called the Royal Niger Company in 1894. This Royal Niger Company is what is the company actually that owns Nigeria, or what was actually bought over, what bought over the space called Nigeria. And incidentally, this Royal Niger Company is still available today, which is the company called Unilever that makes the soaps, like Lynx and some of that. They were in Nigeria for the longest. I don't know if they are still in Nigeria actually, So this Royal Niger Company, the British firm called Royal Niger Company in 1894, is where Lord Lugard, that amalgamated Nigeria, joined. Now, Folashore was the designation of the states, or Folashore saw the designation of the states or areas that make up the south of the present-day Nigeria as Royal Niger Company's territories, Cumbersom, according to Schwartz in 1968. Now, thoughtfully, she came up with a simple word, Nigeria, which encompasses the whole of the area. Now, probably, she may have derived it from two words, Niger, from the river Niger, and area. The two meaning Niger area compressed into one word, Nigeria, a term which applied only to the present-day southern part of Nigeria, known as the Southern Protectorate, occupied predominantly by the Yoruba and Igbo and other ethnic group, according to Awolowo's book in 1947. So there is this house fly that is flying everywhere. So according to Awolowo's book in 1947, the place called Nigeria was the southern, was the Yorubas and the Igbos part of the country, which is the southern part of the country. In the year 1900, Frederick Lugard was made the British High Commission of the Protectorate of the Northern Nigeria, according to Swartz's book in 1964, and also Nicholson in 1969. In 1914, when both the Southern and the Northern Protectorates were amalgamated to become one country, Lugard, now as Governor General, retained the name Nigeria for the newly created states. This meant that before the amalgamation in 1914, only the South was referred to as Nigeria, right? And this name was retained when the Northern Protectorate was joined to it. This was how numerous existing African states or political communities or units with hundreds of different languages came to be recreated by Britain as one single state. So what happened to Nigeria did not just happen to Nigeria, it happened to different countries as well. And people were divided and forced into countries the way, according to the Berlin Conference, whatever the Europeans wanted or the area they wanted. So they just divided it amongst themselves, ignoring the wider and the deeper historical and sociological divergence between the North and the South. So they didn't care about whether we are one or not, they just combined the North and the South together. As noted by Schwartz in 1968, the arid predominantly Muslim North and the tropical predominantly Christian South are different countries, right? The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885 gave Britain the legal right over the territories of that part of West Africa, right? So in the Berlin Conference, that's when Britain was given the right over Nigeria, or even the whole part of that West Africa, right? Now, some authors, Miaya, 2002, believe the country as designated in 1914 was meant to serve the interest of the British government. Some political analysts are of the view that the British government has joined these people, Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, and other group of mutually incompatible peoples, in Crowder 1966 book, together to create a nation in its own image and likeness. So the British sort of combined these whole tribes together to form Nigeria according to, what they like, according to their own likeness. Also bear in mind that in Britain, they also have similar things, similar makeup in their countries, whereby they have the Welsh, the Scottish, the Northern Irish, and also the English as Great Britain. Now, as Governor General, Lugard had two lieutenant governors under him, one of whom was in charge of the northern sector and the other administered the southern sector. So when Lord Lugard was, obviously during the colonial masters, when the colonial rule was still in hold over Nigeria, you just had two lieutenant governors. So Lord Lugard had just two people under him, one covering the whole of the northern part of Nigeria and one covering the whole of southern part of Nigeria. Now, this is the history of Nigeria, so we understand. So it was just Lord Lugard at the top, then one for the whole of the south, both the Yorubas, the Igbos, other ethnicity from the south, and one for the whole of the north. Now, the other administered the southern part. Now, in 1946, a federal system of government with a constitution was introduced in Nigeria. So the first time Nigeria had a constitution was in 1946. A federal system of government with a constitution was introduced in Nigeria. This was known as the Richards Constitution, after Arthur Richards, who succeeded Lugard. So the first constitution we had was by a man called Arthur Richards, who succeeded Lugard, who ruled that same over the north and the south after Lugard left. Now, with this new constitutional arrangement, the central legislature based in the capital Lagos administered the whole country. So they only have one legislature, one national assembly in Lagos. You know, after Lugard left, Arthur Richards came in and had one legislature. Now they are trying to nation build. They are trying to create a political system. So they just had one national assembly, which was their legislature all over the whole Nigeria. And that was situated in Lagos, right? Now, while regional houses of assembly were created in each of the regional capitals, now, for the west, Ibadan, for the east, Enugu, and for the north, Kaduna. So now they also, while they have Lagos as the federal legislature, they also created 3 regional governments, or 3 regional registration as well, and situated already. We have one in Lagos, which is the Yoruba land, but then what they did was to create another legislature or House of Assembly for the Yorubas or for the West in Ibadan, and then created one for the East in Enugu, and then created one for the North in Kaduna. Now, these houses acted as the advisory body to the federal legislature on regional issues. Now, these 3 regional House of Assembly will now provide information to Lagos, which was the whole country, the registration for the whole country, based on their regional issues. It's good for us to understand this history. Now, a review of Richard's Constitution in 1951 gave the regions increased autonomy in line with constitutional principle. That English is difficult. Revision of the Constitution in 1954 gave further and increased powers to the regions, and in 1957, as a result of the constitutional talk in London, the Federal Council of Ministers were constituted on the basis of an all-Nigerian body, except for the British Governor General, who continued to act as the President of the Council. And this is taken from the book by Uweshie in 1971, written in 1971 on page 5. So what then happens was that slowly, power was now cascaded down from the Lagos House of Assembly to the regions of Kaduna, Ibadan, and Enugu. So the first, because they were reviewing the constitution, that Richard's Constitution, they were reviewing it, and each time they review it, they devolve power to these regions. And that continued. The first review they did after 1946 was in 1951. After 1951 was in 1954. After 1954 was in 1957. Right? In that same year, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa was appointed as the Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister of Nigeria. Right? So in 1957, Tafawa Balewa was now appointed as the first Prime Minister of Nigeria. Now, Western and Eastern Nigeria, the South, we are giving regional self-government. So bear in mind, Tafawa Balewa is from the North, right? So he was still the Prime Minister of the entire Nigeria, but he was in the North. But the West and the East, which is the Yorubas and the Igbos, still had their own self-government. So they still have their own region. The Northern leaders said they were not yet ready for self-government. The Northerners said they don't want self-government. So remember, initially, when power was in Lagos, when they had a federal assembly or the Federal House of Assembly in Lagos, when the colonial masters were still there, which is Richard Arthur. Now, based on the constitution, what they had was Ibadan, Kaduna, and Enugu. Now, at some point, when they kept devolving powers from that Lagos House of Assembly to the regions, slowly as the years gone by, they now at some point made Tafawa Balewa from the north to be the prime minister, now gave powers of self-government to the Yorubas and the Igbos to form their own government. But why they formed their own government, the North said they are not ready for self-government. You see, this is where the Northerners started becoming very wise. So politically in Nigeria, the Northerners are far more ahead than those in the South. And I think this is when they started getting into the hearts of the British. Yes, they were building us. The British was building Nigeria. So they were helping Nigeria just like they did for all their other colonies. They were releasing people they think, okay, they can now look after themselves. Colonization means helping the country to grow and build and help them to become a country, to nation build. That's what colonization is. So at some point, the Northerners showed that they are not really interested in grabbing power, right? And already Tafawa Balewa was the prime minister, the first prime minister. So they said they're not ready for self-government. But at the same time in the South, the West and the East already have their self-government, right? Now, this is when they started loving the North. Where did I stop? The Northern leaders said they were not ready for self-government. Hence the delay till March 1959, a year and 6 months before Nigeria was to be granted independence in 1960. It was in 1960 that Nigeria as an independent country began its seemingly long and tenuous political walk towards democracy. Right? Since its merger until now, Nigeria has been bedeviled by one crisis or another crisis, from unhealthy ethnic and religious cleavages, vividly dividing between the predominantly Muslim North and substantially Christian South. There is always endemic tension in the polity, with the Muslims in the North often hinting to their right to federal power. Now, whether advisedly or not, or by virtue of the amount of military installation which the British built in the north, especially Kaduna and Zaria, and then built, I think, only 2 in the western region and only 1 in the eastern region, I think the North felt that they have the right to be the political leaders in Nigeria or to have federal power, maybe because Tafawa Balewa, which was from the North, was the first man to be made prime minister. Maybe that's their thinking. Because the British chose them to be prime minister first, maybe that gave them the idea that actually, because I was the first, now it is my right. I'm only saying, I'm not saying that's the truth. I'm only saying, like, it's good to start thinking like in that sense. We're now discussing the history of Nigeria. Where did all these mentalities start from, right? According to this writer. And by the way, this book is the best work done on Nigeria's history, because what he did was to reference every other work on every other literature or history book written by Nigerians and by the white people or by any other person, and reference them and also make an argument and answer some questions, right? Now, from 1960 to 2012, Nigeria has the following political leaders with their region of origin and religious affiliation as indicated below. Number 1, Tafawa Balewa, North Muslim. Agi Ironsi, South Christian. So an Igbo man, after Tafawa Balewa, became the second prime minister of Nigeria. So an Hausa man, sorry, not an Hausa man. Now, Hausa is a language and a tribe, just like an Igbo is also a language and a tribe. But it is very important for me to say at this juncture that an Hausa man has never been the president of Nigeria. The people from the north that have always produced presidency are usually the Fulanese. Most of them are the Fulanese, or like Gowon, the TV, or from any other tribe. So it is very important for us to note that Hausa, they can speak Fufude or Hausa as a language, just like Igbos can speak Igbo. But then Igbo is also a tribe, but that does not mean that everybody from the southeast or from the then eastern region were Igbos. No, you have the Ogojas, you have the Jaws, you have the Efik, those from Akwa Ibom or today's Cross River or Rivers. All of those people were different ethnicity. So when we say Eastern region, just understand it that if you divide Nigeria into three, based on the river Niger, the way it's sort of conferenced at Lokoja and all of that, that is the north, the west, and then the east. So everything to the east is what you call as the Eastern region then. And it was not just the Igbos. The Igbos were just one part of them. The Yorubas are quite distinct because they're quite popular. But then the Hausas also had the Fulanis with them. So it's very important that I said that. So after Tafawa Balewa, it was Agi Ironsi. Then Yakubu Gowon, a North Christian. It's actually important for us to know that Yakubu, some people say that his name is not actually Yakubu. Some people mention that his name is Jack. So apparently he's actually a Christian from the north. Then Murtala Mohammed is a North Muslim. Olusegun Obasanjo, South Christian by default. Shehu Shagari is North Muslim. Mohammed Buhari, North Muslim. Ibrahim Babangida, North Muslim. Sani Abacha, North Muslim. Abdullahi Abubakar, North Muslim. Olusegun Obasanjo again, South Christian. Now we are now into the civilian rule, because the second tenure or the second time that Olusegun Obasanjo became the president, he's now started the 1999 civilian rule. Now, Musa Yaradua, North Muslim. Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, South Christian. So the North, since the existence of Nigeria, the North holistically putting both the TV, the Hausa, the Fulani, everybody in the North now has produced 9 presidents. The South has produced 4, and in the North has also produced, out of those 9, 8 Muslims, and the South has produced 4 Christian or 5 Christian if you count Obasanjo going 2 times. Now this book was written a while back, otherwise they could have also have mentioned Buhari's tenure, which also have made it about 10 Muslims and about 4 to 5 Christians, right? Now, Nigeria got its political independence in 1960. On 15th of January 1966, it has its first coup led by Major Emmanuel Ifajuna and Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzogu. This coup, which ended the life of the First Republic. So when you are listening to news, sometimes they will say Second Republic, Third Republic. It is very important for us to understand what is Republic. So what was Republic is civilian rule, then you have military rule, then they went back to civilian rule. So it's imperative for us to understand that when the British left, they left us with a model of government that then themselves were practicing, which is in the Britain, United Kingdom of Great Britain, you had the Scottish, the Wales, the Northern Irish, and the English. But they all form part of Great Britain without autonomy, but they are all civilian rule. That's what they left in Nigeria. They knew that we are not all one people, but what they did was to create us into regions and give us over to civilian rule. And that's why the West had their own regional powers, the East had their own regional powers, and the North had their own regional powers. Now, what then happened was that from 1960, when we got our independence, Tafawa Balewa was the prime minister, but it didn't last for so long. So the First Republic ended in 1966. So only 6 years of the First Republic. Now, that military rule lasted from 1966 to 1999. That is the Second Republic, the military rule. And then from 1999 to current date, we're now having the Third Republic, which is the coming back of the civilian rule, which is what we call democracy. I hope that makes sense. Now, the coup which ended the life of the First Republic is remarkable in 3 major respects. The military takeover of the reins of government, the massacre of the Easterners, especially the Igbo, by the Muslim Hausa in the north, and the secession of the East and declaration of the Republic of Biafra. The next chapter examines Nigerian first coup in detail. Now, I'm going to go to chapter 2. Now, the point of me doing this long video, like I said in my short video in the morning, was that there is misconception, and this is leading to the fact that a lot of people hate the Igbos in Nigeria, and a lot of distortions in our history. In fact, for us, our age mates, my age mate, I'm a 90s baby, early 90s baby, which tells me that a lot of my generation don't have access to Nigeria's history because it was taken out of our curriculum. So a lot of us are now trying to catch up to understand what exactly happened. You know, we were not taught about the Biafran war. We're not taught about what started it, who started it, what happened, and all of that, because they are trying to conceal it. They feel like it was too dark, you know, a lot of it. But then, even just becoming British, you have to know the history of Britain. They have to teach you all the dark, you know, they have to teach you all the wars. You have to be aware, you know. And they still celebrate the D-Day. Americans will celebrate their own, you know, major Independence Day or July 4th. You know, every country will celebrate their own memorial days. And these are important because you need to have a history. These are things that define the history. So I believe there is no shame in knowing your history. And because the truths have not been studied and taught, people then, by virtue of their biases or what have been seen as a, how do I put it, a more common narrative, have started hating Igbos for what they don't even understand. And Igbos, for the longest time, have started asking the question of, why are we so much hated? Why are we hated? Why are we hated? Now, I want to say this. Personally, I grew up in Onitsha. Onitsha is in Anambra State. Now, I came to abroad straight from Onitsha. Now, as a kid, don't forget I was born early 90s. So, I just, after I became an adult, that's when I realized that I was actually born during Abacha's military rule. Now, looking back as a child, I can't remember the difference between a military rule, a civilian rule, or what's the difference. So I can't really tell what's the difference, because I think Abacha's military rule probably ended, or actually continued till probably 1999. But all I knew then was that there was orderliness. So all those who were against indiscipline probably was happening then and all of that. And I probably didn't know because I was a child, right? But what is important about what shaped my childhood, especially for those of us who grew up in the East, was that there is always this thing about Anabosa Abiola or Anabosu Guaosa, which simply translates to they are running in the north or they are running for Abiola. So that means there is always war in the northern part of Nigeria. I'm telling you now, what shaped my childhood about Nigeria. So I'm always asking myself, and the people we call the Abokis, which are the northerners who probably do things like Megad or security or people that will repair your shoes, that work on the street, they always have radios. And once they get information that something happened in the north, even before the Igbos or the people in Onitsha will know, they already gone into the barracks. And once they go to the barracks, they are secure. You have Army Day barrack in Onitsha there that is always protecting them. But all the same, there was always reprisal attacks, because when they hear that Igbos are being killed in the north, sometimes people out of anger will go back, go to the streets and start looking for northerners. So growing up with that kind of understanding of what the society was like got me like, okay, there is something wrong with Nigeria makeup. There is something wrong. Like, we're not really united. Why are people always running from the north? And then people will tell you, oh, I've told you to come back from Ugwausa. Like those who have people in the north, they say, I've always told you to come down. So, but the point is, why is it that Igbos always go to the north and the northerners always come down to the east? And yet everybody will always run helter-skelter when there is these troubles. Now, of course, there are elements that are good people and there are elements that are bad people, which will cause the good ones to be running up and down when they commit. So that's in place. That gave me, that led me to starting to ask questions. Now, another thing that happened to me, a culture shock that happened to me, was when I came to the UK. I landed to the UK. So I didn't know there was something, I didn't know that up NEPA was something wrong. I didn't know it was a bad thing. So for me, it was normal, right? And if you don't have money, you don't deserve to have ungenerated power, which means you don't have money. If you don't have money for generator, and we didn't have generator. I come from a humble home, right? So I thought it was normal. It was now when I came to the UK that I realized that you could actually stay. And for how many years that I've been in this country now, the light has not gone off. We've had uninterrupted power supply for over 14 years or so that I've been in the UK. So that was a culture shock. So initially when I came as a student, I was like, how is everywhere so neat, so nice? You know, beans are taken out. So it was a sharp contrast to what I knew to be the case in Onitsha as a young boy. I go upstairs, where there is, say for example, deaths on the streets, there is always issues, there is always, running from armed robbers, there was the popular Bakassi, there was just so many issues in Nigeria. So for me, coming to that orderliness, I was like, okay, this is not what I am used to, right? Then another question that came to me was that, okay, why is it that these politicians that come here, because I noticed that they were coming, I asked and say, yes, they do come here. I was like, why did they come here, see how nice these places are, and not replicate that in Nigeria? Guys, please bear with me. Let me deal with my son. Yeah, go upstairs. Go upstairs. Yeah, sorry, apologies for that. So I kept asking the question, okay, why is it that they come here, see how orderly, like the British will even do their roads, they do the places that human beings will walk, they will even make it easy for people that have wheelchair to sort of, climb and be able to use the streets without trouble. So that got me. You enter the red bus, the bus will come down to the pavement level so that people with wheelchair can easily go in, or people pushing buggy can go in. Every street was tarred as against the dust and the bad roads in Nigeria. So that was another culture shock that happened to me. So I was like, okay, hold on. Now in 2014, then I got introduced to Nnamdi Kanu. So Nnamdi Kanu was now speaking against the ills. I mean, he started from like reading news, like Radio Biafra, you read about the ills in the society, he will speak against it. Then they were building cenotaph in Enugu, which is like a big ego thing like that. And then the governor of Enugu State destroyed it then. So that's how I just said, okay, fair enough. This is somebody that is doing the right thing. He's speaking against government. And the rest is history. We know where Nnamdi Kanu is today. And, we are calling for his release. Now, I'm going to go into the actual history of the events of what happened in the Second Republic, which is when the coup took place. Now, the first coup of January 15, 1966 and the Igbo connection. Now, January 15, 1966 was a major turning point in the political history of Nigeria. This was the beginning of a failed revolution. So it was supposed to be a revolution, but it failed. Now, that abruptly put an end to the First Republic, the rule by politicians, and ushered in the period of military leadership led by Major Emmanuel Ifajina and Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzogu, both Igbo. The coup has been designated as the Igbo coup by some authors and politicians. The first person is Ayandele, 1973. So Ayandele in 1973 wrote a book and called it an Igbo coup. And the second one was by Maduebo. Maduebo is Alexander Maduebo, who is the general commanding officer for the Biafrans, as well as he held the armory unit for Nigeria as well. In his book of the book that I also posted on my page in 1980. Now, so perceived, the coup has had lasting political and democratic implications for Nigeria. While some perceptions has aided in ossifying ethnic cleavages, it has also increased the feeling of marginalization of some sections of Nigerian polity, especially amongst the Igbos. So the issue of marginalization did not just start today. The Igbos have been expressing and experiencing it even from ab initio, even from as far back as 1966. There has been marginalization, or even 1960 actually. Now, who feel they deserved from Nigeria all reserved fraternal apology for visiting an unjust and sustained capital political punishment on the entire Igbo nation vis-a-vis their constitutional right to exercise executive power as president of our country. Owashie solicits explanation for branding Nzogu coup as Igbo coup. Now, a writer called Owashie is soliciting explanation. Why is it called an Igbo coup? Or why did these two authors in 1973 and 1980 call that coup an Igbo coup? And one of them being Igbo himself, which is Alexander Maduebo. Now, for which the entire Igbo people must pay a heavy and recurrent political price, which while Major Gideon Oka's coup of 1990, so another person called Gideon Oka, who is from TV, also attempted a coup in 1990, but failed because then Abacha was the military head, and I think he was doing Babangida's Ella, and Abacha made that coup to fail, because coup, you have to have approval from the people that matters. So Abacha saw to it that that coup failed. So this Washie was now asking that why was Nzogu's coup branded as an Igbo coup, but Gideon Oka's coup not branded as a TV coup or northern coup? Now, not seen as a thief coup. It is therefore pertinent to examine the validity or non-validity of the Igbo coup hypothesis. There is also the need to determine whether the coup was in any way justified. Now, they want to also ask the question, this Washe is asking, is there any way we can also justify those actions? That coup, was that any justifiable reason why someone could approve of it? Now, there is also the need to determine whether the coup was in any way justified, especially in juxtaposition with the subsequent coups in Nigeria, because that was not the only coup. Now, considering the respective socio-political conditions used as justification for the different military interventions, it wasn't the first time military is intervening. So that's what the writer is saying. When you juxtapose all those times that coups happened in Nigeria, was there justification for that initial first one by Kaduna Nzogu and Ifajuna? Now, one seemingly reasonable argument in favor of Igbo coup hypothesis was the failure to kill Major General Aguiyi Ironsi, the general commanding officer, the general army, the Nigerian army. So when that coup happened, the coup that led to the killing of, I think, Tafawa Balewa, who was the prime minister, Ahmed Bello, who was the Sultan of Sokoto, the killing of, I think, a few Yoruba people as well was killed. So now the question is, why was Aguiyi Ironsi not killed? Also being an Igbo man. Then Aguiyi Ironsi was the next in command. Of course, he was the next prime minister, and he was the general officer commanding at the time. So that was why these people are saying it's an Igbo coup, right? Now, and Michael Okpara, the premier of the Eastern region, who we are both Igbo. So people are asking, okay, you killed all these people, why didn't you kill Aguiyi Ironsi, and why didn't you kill Michael Okpara? Now, though these two were marked for assassination by the coup plotters, according to Ikazo, Ikazo is also a historian. Now, he wrote a book in 1977 where he also acknowledged that the coup had plans. So they also planned, the plotters of the coup also planned to kill both Michael Okpara and both Aguiyi Ironsi. Now, the question is, why didn't these two people get killed? Hence, given the thought process, or those who have the thought process, or who have the school of thought that it was an Igbo coup. Now, though these two were marked for assassination by the coup plotters, the failure to kill them was seen to support the theory of the Igbo coup. The rationale for this theory was probably, most probably, was that their killings would have balanced things among the three regions and would have left little or no grounds for doubting the nationalistic intention of the coup plotters, who some think planned the coup for the Igbo political ascension to power. So, now, the argument is that had it been they killed Aguiyi Ironsi and Michael Okpara, who was the leader of the Eastern region, or the general commanding officer, nobody would have thought about it being an Igbo coup or being tribalistic. That was the argument of this school of thought. Now, the view may find justification in the allusion to the northern hegemonic grip of Nigeria as the main reason for the coup. It seems more likely that it is the Muslim North which tends to dominate the rest of Nigeria. So, obviously, because of what the British did by putting Tafawa Balewa there, it seemed as if the North were almost in everything. So they were like, it was like a hegemony. If I keep calling hegemony, it's hard for me to pronounce. So it's like a hegemony whereby everything is also seen as the North is in charge of the whole of Nigeria because of that construct. And again, all the military installations in Nigeria were in the North anyway. although geographically the North has more lands and more more lands, more geographical space. So that could actually be seen as the justification for that. Now, in continuation, he says the northern oligarchies and the Kaduna Mafia and the British government a more favorable relationship with the North. Refer to such as the northern hegemony, the northern oligarchy, and the Kaduna Mafia. So even at that time, people are already seeing that the British were favoring the North and the northern, how do you put it, the northern mafia, because of course that's where all the military installations were, and also the northern oligarchies. They were in charge of the oil, because at the time in 1957, already the British have discovered oil in Nigeria, so they've started oil exploration, and they were already paying concessions to Nigeria. So at that time, the relationship between the British and the Northerners are already good. So people from the East and the West are already feeling like, this relationship is now tilted to one side. Hope you guys are following. I don't know if I'm explaining this book well, but I will keep trying. Now, okay, so Balewa and Sadona may have got the impression that at least politically the country belonged to the people of the North, right? So the Tafawa Balewa, being the prime minister, and the Sadona of Sokoto believed that as far as politics is concerned, Nigeria belonged to the North. And I think some people still share that sentiment even to today. They believe that the North has power, or it's their birthright, especially the Hausa Fulani. Now, other Nigerians outside this political ambience were regarded as strangers and foreigners. So this mentality started as at then. People saw other parts of Nigeria, the West, the East, or the South, the whole South, as strangers even in their own line. Now, as Kuka, as at 1993 wrote in his book, has pointed out, bolstered by the British power and guaranteed support, the arrogance of the northern ruling class turned into intolerance. Now, it is very important for people to read history, because some of the things we see today are not things that started today. There are things that have been there from the past. So according to Bishop Kuka, which everybody knows in Kaduna, they've already started saying that as at then, during the time of Tafawa Balewa, the Northerners were rubbing it off on other parts of Nigeria, which is a very young country. Nigeria was given independence in 1960, but this is happening as at still it is even just shortly after the 1960, the North, because they are having this nice romance with the British, already they were rubbing it off. That even Bishop Kuka from the North as well wrote this in his book. Bolstered by the British power and guaranteed support, the arrogance of the northern ruling class turned into intolerance. So it was now becoming difficult for the South to relate to what the North was doing. Now, all this might have convinced Adeniran, that wrote a book in 2022, to believe it was the excesses, arrogance, and false belief in the divine right to all God's blessing by certain elements triggered the first coup d'etat on 15th of January 1966 by Major Emmanuel Ifajuna and Major Chukwuma Nzogu, Kaduna Nzogu, and its subsequent reverberations. Now, according to another writer from Yoruba land, Adeniran, in 2002, he believed that what caused the first coup was the excesses of the Northerners, right? And their false arrogance and false belief in their divine right to all the God's blessings and the certain elements, that triggered the actual first coup of 15 January 1966. This is why I said, depending on the book you read, you have different ideas. Now, Kuka and Adeniran, Northerner and Yoruba, wrote books and believed that this is what led to the first coup. That it was the way the Northerners were robbing off our rights, Nigeria. And don't forget, the oil money already coming from the British was now going to the Northerners. Meanwhile, it was coming from the eastern part of Nigeria. So I need you guys to follow this history very well. And get this book if you can. It's called In Biafra, Africa Died, by Major Emmanuel Ifajuna and Major Chukwuma Nzogu, and its subsequent revelations. And of course, the consequences of that first coup that happened to the Igbos as well. Now, by certain elements, Adeniran is referring to the Hausa Fulani leaders of the northern Nigeria, a reference which is more overt in page 69 of the same work. So this writer, this is why I said it's the most comprehensive book. He has done the reading of all these books for us and referenced them where appropriate, capturing their thought process and aligning them, and then answering some of these questions. Now, on the other side of the argument are those who contend that the coup had no ethnic motive, but was rather necessitated by the political circumstances of the time, right? Indeed, Ifajuna. So Ifajuna actually also wrote a book himself in 1966. Indeed, Ifajuna 1966 explains that the issue in Nigeria during the regime of Balewa were not just a question of North versus South. Now, follow me, people had their own perception when they were writing books. But then Ifajuna, which is part of the coup plotters, now said it's not a simple question of North versus South, as Kuka and Adeniran have said in their books. Follow me. Now, he says, but problems of incompetence produced by one of the most reactionary regimes in history, right? However, why was only one of the 5 coup planned army officers a non-Igbo, Yoruba, and the rest Igbo? This is a salient question which some of the authors who disagree with the Igbo coup designation have to clarify. Now, according to Ifajuna, which is the main plotter of the coup, actually, not Kaduna Nzogu, also an Igbo man, he said that it's not a simple question of North versus South. But according to him, he said the reason why they carried the coup was the problems of incompetence produced by one of the most reactionary regimes in history. Right? So he's basically saying it's because of the failure of Tafawa Balewa's government. And they called it a reactionary government. So things will happen before they react. So he was not reading the country well, according to Ifajuna. Now, the conclusion one can draw from much literature on the demise of the First Republic is that the 15 July 1966 coup, which ousted the government of Balewa, was dictated by... Now, the writer is saying that from all the books he's read, he has drawn conclusion that the reason for the first coup that happened in 1966, only 6 years after Nigeria got its independence, can be given to these 3 points. Listen, the first one, high-level corruption in the government. Number 2, violent political crisis in Yoruba land. Number 3, thief riots, which in comparison with Yoruba crisis was inconsequential. So, look at it this way. There was corruption in government, there was Yoruba crisis, and there was also TV riots or thief riots, right? Which is where Gowon come from. But the writer then says that the thief riots, compared to what was happening in Yoruba land in the West, was inconsequential, was very small. And this is what led to the coup, according to the writer. Now, of the above 3, a number of political commentators on the subject tend to agree that primary and most proximate cause was the political crisis in Yoruba land. Right? This is what political commentators are saying, that it is because of the problems in Yoruba land that caused the coup. Now, I am going to elaborate on Ifajuna 1966. Now, he said he's going to elaborate on the book that Ifajuna wrote, which is one of the coup plotters. He says, the principal leader of the coup attests to the corruption and laid out anarchy in the West. Like I said, these are military guys. Ifajuna is a military guy. Remember, Nigeria as at then, before the coup, was civilian rule. So these civilian rulers had so much corruption that these military guys had to carry out the coup. And this is what Ifajuna is saying. The principle of the attests to the corruption and the laid out anarchy. So it wasn't just corruption. It was also the laid out anarchy. So there was so much anarchy in Yoruba land as at the time. Right? Now, in the West, as to why they struck. So if the person that carried out the coup, right, the person that originated the coup was Ifajuna, right? Ifajuna and Kaduna Nzogu. If they say that the reason why they had to intervene in Nigerians' affair was because the the civilian rulers of the First Republic from 1960 to 1966 were too corrupt, and there was anarchy in the land. And you know, when anarchy is there, it is now the duty of the military to bring peace and order. So they now saw it, whether wisely or unwisely, to bring a solution of coup. Now, I don't think coup is the best solution, but he is now saying that that was the reason. So this is not a political coup. Now, they also planned to kill Agu Ironsi, who was an Igbo man, and also another man called Colonel Unuebe, who was in Lagos at the time in charge of the armory, was also killed when he refused to give them the keys. Do you understand? Now, let me not go too fast based on what I've read before. Let me follow it here. Now, he said subsequent parts of the section will examine the nature of this crisis so as to see if it was sufficient enough to justify military disruptions of the country's democratic process. Now, the writer gave an excerpt from the book Ifajna wrote. He says, it is worth reading the indictment, an unpublished work by Major Emmanuel Ifajna. This work explains why and how he engineered the first military coup in Nigeria. It's like I have a question. Why is the comments off? So I don't get distracted. I'm sorry. I will on the comment when I finish this chapter 2, please. I don't want to get distracted. But if you have a pen, if you have a pressing question, you can ask me through the questions there. Now, many people hold the view that Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzogu was the principal originator and planner of the January 15, 1966 coup, but it was rather Major Ifajna, Major Nzogu, executed his role with military precision and made a broadcast, and thus became, for the public, the main genesis of the coup. So, Ifajna is saying that he is the person that actually started the coup. He was the one that originated the coup. It was his idea. But because Ifajna was because Nzogu, Kaduna Nzogu was like the military, he was the trainer. He was the one training young recruits. So he was the one that carried it out. And he was the one that went to radio. You know, after a coup, you have to go to radio and announce saying power has changed or you have taken over power, and you announce yourself as the new head of the state, right? So because it was now Kaduna Nzogu that said that, you know, it was seen that it was Kaduna Nzogu that carried this coup, but it was Ifajna. But all of them had a part in it. Now, about the Western political crisis, Oyeweso, somebody called Oyeweso in 1992 wrote a book about the Western political crisis. And this guy referenced it in his book, the writer of this particular book, has pointed out that the conflict between Awolowo and Akintola, two Western Yoruba political contenders, fueled by the Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa's ineptitude and corrupt government, as what to a considerable extent laid the background to the military intervention of 1966 and the eventual civil war. Oyeweso, 1992, page 126. It is quite important for us to know our history. The person that wrote this book that was referenced in this write-up or research was a Yoruba man, and he clearly pointed it out that what led, of course, that's his opinion, right? Now, what led to the actual reason why these guys carried the coup was the the Western political crisis between Awolowo and Akintola, which were both civilians. Now, this is how it all started. Awolowo, the leader of the action group and the premier of the Western region, surrendered his position as premier to vie for the power at the federal level in the 1959 elections. So 1959, which is the penultimate year to 1960, you know, he left his position to vie for the elections, right? Now, consequently, his position as premier went to his deputy, Ladoke Akintola. It was not long before rifts set in within AG as a result of the party politics differences and personality clashes. Sorry, the way I'm reading this book is not right. So he says it was not long before the rift set in within AG as a result of the party policy differences and personality clashes, according to the book written by Ikazo in 1977, between the two major actors, Awolowo and Akintola, each with fellowship in the House of Assembly. So the problem between Akintola and Awolowo was actually a problem that has to do with Awolowo wanting to vie for federal position, and because he was from the western region, of course, he gave it to his deputy, Akintola. Now, when he gave it to Akintola, it's as if they had an issue with the policy of the party and all whatnot. This was also happening in the East. Zeke also had an issue with, one other guy, Ayota or something like that. But I don't want to go so far into the story. Let me follow it chronologically according to the writer here. Now, following a parliamentary petition, Akintola was dismissed as premier by the governor of the Western region on May 25, 1962. Now, Nigeria witnessed the disgraceful spectre of parliamentarians fighting like thugs, arming themselves with shears, speakers' mace, and the furniture in the Western House of Assembly. It took police action and the application of tear gas to restore order, according to Ikazo in 1997, page 26. So this particular write-up now by the writer was lifted from Ikazo. Ikazo is a politician. He was invited to Channels TV to discuss the Alexander Maduebu's book on the Nigerian Revolution and the Biafran plot or something like that. I think that's the name. I posted it on my page so you could see that book. So I've seen him on TV. Ikazo is actually one of the very best historians that you have in Nigeria. So what he wrote here was that things were so bad in the Western region, in their parliament then. Remember, the North had their parliament in Kaduna. Yoruba, the West, have their parliament in Ibadan. And Enugu, which was Igbos, they have their own parliament. But in the West is where there is chaos, right? And especially in the on the 25th of May, 1962, Akintola was dismissed. When he was dismissed by the premier, the governor of the Western region, Nigeria witnessed the disgraceful spectre of parliamentarians. They were fighting. I mean, we've seen politicians fight all the time on the House of Assembly, but that was the first one where they were using the mace. And mace, if you know that mace that they carry like this to come in, that is the symbol of power. The mace has to come in before the house will sit and everything they sit. And once they knock that wood, that's the whole rituals of, parliament and registration and all of that. So when they were using that as weapon, it's disgraceful. And the military were watching. So they have to bring peace. So according to them, that was the, how bad things were. Now, Akintola later formed and led a new party called United People's Party, UPP. He appealed to the Prime Minister, Balewa, against Awolowo. Do you understand? So when Akintola was now removed or dismissed by the premier of Western Governor of Western Region, now Akintola now appealed to Tafawa Balewa, who was the Prime Minister of the whole Nigeria, right? Now he opened his own party as well, United People's Party, UPP, and left Action Group, which was the Yoruba party, because Yoruba had AG, Action Group, the Northerners had MPC, National People's Congress, the Igbos have NCNC. I've forgotten the full meaning. Now, he appealed to the Prime Minister Balewa against Awolowo. Awolowo, being a known enemy of the Southerner of Sokoto, according to Maduebu's book in 1980, who was Balewa's elite boss, was arrested and put in prison. So it is on the record that the person that imprisoned Awolowo was Tafawa Balewa. And the funny thing with Nigerian history is that most of the players are friends. Tafawa Balewa, Awolowo, Zeke were all instrumental in Nigeria getting their independence. Yes, it was Zeke that gave the final speech and everything, but these guys were instrumental. So they were the intelligent ones representing their tribes or representing the different regions, right? So imagine now when one put one in jail, but that was because he was having an issue with Akintola. So it's good for us to understand this history. Now, Balewa, who was okay, it's also known that the Southerner of Sokoto, which is Ahmadu Bello, was Tafawa Balewa's elite boss, because the construct of the Northerners is that they always put religion above any other thing. So the Southerner of Sokoto is like their head. It was like their most reverenced personality. Do you understand? So it was like an elitist bot to Tafawa Balewa. So even though Tafawa Balewa is the prime minister, he was still somehow under the Southern of Sokoto, who was Ahmadu Bello at the time. Hope you're following. Now, so Awolowo was now put in prison. Now, the straw that broke the camel's back came from the West in the regional election of November 1965. Now, Awolowo is already in prison. Now, the regional election of November 1965 was the last straw that broke the camel's back, according to this writer. Still again in Yoruba land. Now, the elections were massively rigged and violently pursued, with death and violence dispensed towards voters and candidates. So all these things we are hearing today, all the chaos in Lagos, this has been the norm in the West. As far back as 1965, Nigeria was only 5 years old. They were already killing, there were already violence in the West during the elections, right? Now, it was massively, the word massively was used, massively rigged and violently pursued, with death and violence dispersed towards voters and candidates, according to the book written by Ikazo in 1997, page 36. All this notwithstanding, Akintola was asked by the governor of the Western region to form a government, right? So Akintola, who was the deputy to Awolowo, who is now in prison, was also asked to form a government by the governor of the Western region. And then, in a matter of hours, Western region exploded in an orgy of mindless violence as party supporters clashed. Opponents as well as innocent people were beaten, murdered, and burnt, with private and commercial property being burnt and looted. The action was mostly carried out by the outrage of supporters of the action group, who regarded Akintola as a thief and Ole, who has stolen the premiership, according to the book by Ikazo in 1997. Hope you are following. So it did not only stop in what happened in the parliament. This now came down to the streets. So this also continued to the streets when they had election in November. The one in parliament happened in May. The one in the streets and the election happened in November of 1965. So Akintola was asked to form a government. He won the election. The people of Action, remember, he's now formed a new party called UPP. The Action Group people, the AG people, started calling him Thief Ole, and they were killing. There was, in fact, according to the writer, he said, I don't want to invent my own word. He said, innocent people were beaten, murdered, burnt, with private and commercial property being burnt and looted. Right? That means people that have their private homes, people that were selling their businesses and commercial property, everything was burnt. You can imagine the chaos. And this is under civilian rule. And you know people that have businesses. So if they are saying they are burning things in businesses, and you know people that do businesses, these are the Igbos, right? So this was how it was happening. People were looted. Businesses were looted. Now the action was carried out by the outraged supporters of Action Group, who regarded Akintola as a thief. This was the genesis, the first problem that met Nigeria, all in the West, between Action Group and UPP, led by Akintola and Awolowo. So it was Awolowo-Akintola problem that laid the foundation for the need for the military to intervene to overthrow the civilian government left for us by the British. Now follow me. This anarchy and bloodshed reigned in the land. The situation in Nigeria was so bad that the question asked by every Nigerian patriot was not whether the government should go. The question was when and how, according to Ifajuna's book in 1966, page 7. As noted by Maduebo in 1980 book, the ultimate result was a serious outbreak of rioting and violence throughout the region, which gradually spread towards Lagos. Remember, the parliament of the Western region was in the West. So all of these things, was in Ibadan. The parliament of the Western region was in Ibadan, right? So all these issues now happened in Ibadan, and then it started spreading and getting almost towards Lagos, right? Somebody have asked the question. Until you realize we care so much about social media, did you see what they did to the Yoruba? Until you realize we care so much about social media, did you see what they did to the Yoruba? I'm confused. I don't understand your question. Clarify. Now, the ultimate result was a serious outbreak of rioting and violence throughout the region, which gradually spread towards Lagos. Page 37 of Maduebu's book in 1980. Now, another writer called Abba in 2005, he says it was the breakup of the AG that sparked off the Western regional crisis. So, according to another writer, it was the breakup of the action group AG in the Western region in the Yoruba land that actually sparked off the crisis, which became a major factor facilitating the violent military overthrow of the First Republic. This is another writer confirming it. That what caused the problem of Nigeria was the problem that happened in action group, the Yorubas. Now, the political situation in Nigeria, particularly in the West, Yoruba, had earlier made somebody like Soyinka, the Professor Wolo Soyinka that won the, is it Laurel Robert or whatever they call it, Nobel laureate of Nigeria. So the same Soyinka that wrote his book in 2006 said he took up arms to restore order. So even Soyinka himself, the issue that I was having, made him to take up, and he's even him as, if I think he's the one that even wrote that book. He wrote the book in 2006 to say he took up arms, because a lot of people have been saying that Soyinka took up arms to even go to the police and whatever, you know. So Soyinka took up arms because of the issues that was happening in those times. To restore order, that's why he took up arms. He was ready to acknowledge the question of willingness to take up arms against a cruel despot was not one with which I found myself suddenly confronted. I had once resolved it. So according to his book, sorry, I'm not reading this the proper way, but what Soyinka is saying is that he even owned up to the fact that he took up arms to restore order because, you know, he was willing enough to take up arms because of the cruel despot, you know, with which he found himself suddenly confronted because of what was happening. He wanted to resolve it during the Western Nigerian uprising of 1964 to 1965. So all this crisis was happening for like about a year, 1964 to 1965, which had necessitated the takeover of the broadcasting station in Ibadan. According to his book in 2006, page 428, he said even that issue led to the point that the broadcasting station itself in Ibadan was taken over. I think I have some questions. Did you see what they did to the Yoruba actress? If they all come together to do it to the president and governor, they will be able to have a revolution. Okay, hold on. I'm not calling for a revolution here. I want us to understand what happened to Nigeria. I always say that Nigeria went through a lot as a baby. Nigeria was like only, let me say, the issue started about, let's say, 5 years old, 1965 or probably thereabout. That's when this action group crisis started, when Awolowo wanted to go to the federal and leave the Western region. But probably just like what we're having now, the issue with Wike and Fubara, that's exactly what was happening between Akintola, who was the deputy of Awolowo. Do you understand? That's the beginning of Nigeria's problem. Now, the inability of the Prime Minister, Tafawa Balewa, to control the 1965 situation in the Western region, according to Ikazo 1997, was the proximate cause for the military intervention to terminate civilian rule in the bloody coup d'etat on January 1966, according to Ifeanyina's book of 1966, the architect of the coup admits. Have you seen the point now? This is the fact that we don't know as Nigerian youths, and everybody's going about hating Igbos. Ifeanyina was a military guy and said because the then president or the prime minister as it were, which was Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa, could not control the situation. Already that the politicians has fought in the House of Assembly with maize. Now the anarchy has spread from Ibadan going up to Lagos. They were now killing people, damaging properties, damaging personal and commercial properties and all of that. That was what led these military guys to intervene. They will not tell you that. They will just tell you Igbos are not trusted. It's good for us to know our history. Now, the election held in October 1965 in Western Nigeria provided the last straw of iniquity that broke the crooked back of the government. Those who caused the confusion stayed on. They said they were prepared to rule even if it's only one man survived among our people. We could not wait to see our people die to one man. We could not wait to see the nation destroyed because of evil men. Why should evil men not go? So Emefiena is saying in his book, these people, according to those that are creating the problem at those times, refuse to go. That they are saying that even if it is the last man standing, that they will continue. So Emefiena is now asking, why should we allow evil to go? Now, what Emefiena didn't realize was that even though Adeboyega was going to be part of the coup, who was a Yoruba man, and they plotted the coup together, down the lane, it's going to be switched on him to be tagged an Igbo coup when it failed. Because he failed. He didn't complete. They didn't kill Agi Ironsi. They didn't kill Michael Oba. But what is worth mentioning as well is that the East was not affected with this problem. This problem was happening in the West, North. These are the two places that this was happening. There's whether that Tafawa Balewa to handle the issues, because now government have shifted from Lagos to Kaduna. Or maybe it was still in Lagos, I don't know. But the point was that all these things that was happening in Ibadan and Lagos, they were not able to control it. That is why these military boys decided to act to save their young nation. So it was a place of national pride. It was from a place of, fighting for the country that this thing started. Now, Ojo, another man, another writer, in 1997, is also of the view that the incompetence of Balewa's regime and the chaotic and violent situation in the West was the cause of the military intervention. Another writer shares that same opinion. And this is another Yoruba man. So some Yoruba writers are honest enough to acknowledge that what Nigeria is going through all started from the West. Now, in his book, he says, the six-year-old nation, unhealthy since its birth on October 1, 1960, had by January 1966 shown some terminal symptoms. A politicized 1962 census, according to this Ojo, he's referenced a few things as one of the problems of Nigeria, very young Nigeria, right? So there was a census in 1962, a political anarchy in the Western region, the bloody TV riots, that is in the Tiv area of Nigeria, of the North, a partially boycotted 1964 general election. So the election they had in 1964 for the federal government, was partially boycotted. Wanton arson. So they were setting places on fire, right? Political thuggery and an incompetent leadership at the center. You see the problem? So the problem is not really that Emefiena and Kaduna and Zog one day woke up and started to go and kill all the leaders. There were issues, national issues, that led the military to overthrow the civilian government. Now, if Ojo's comment was the true description of the situation in Nigeria at the time of January 15 coup, some political analysts may find it difficult to argue against the necessity to change the government in power. Emefiena in 1966 acknowledged. So, if Ojo's comment, which is a Yoruba man, that acknowledged the census problem of 1962, the anarchy problem of 1964 general election, as all of that was happening in the West, if you look at all of this question, then some political analysts that are analyzing the situation will find it difficult to argue against the necessity to change the government in power. So the people had the understanding that things were not working. There was anarchy everywhere. General election was rigged, and this is a young nation. This is why I feel like Nigerians are corrupt in their DNA. They started having problems just immediately after they were given independence. Even the census of 1962 had a problem. General election of 1964 had a problem. You see? So now, some people are arguing that the people that carried the coup are within their rights to even carry the coup. Now, I might not share that same opinion because I now know the aftermath of it. And a lot of Igbos were killed. But That was their thinking then. In Nigeria, no ideological concepts motivated the actions of the officer who took up arms against the regime. The issue was simple and clear. Whether or not a rotten regime was to be allowed to stay in power and ruin the lives of tens of millions of people. He underlines the popularity of the revolution thus. Right? So what he was saying was that it was very clear that they needed to do what they had to do. So the coup plotters are justified in their reason. And this book was now written, of course, after the whole coup and everything. So they are now acknowledging, yes, that even if they turn back the hands of time, that what they did was right. But of course, we know that you cannot argue that something is right if the end was really bad. But that was their stand, right? Indeed, Indeed, the satisfaction with the old regime was not limited to the Southerners. There were many, if not a majority, among those from the North who were tired of the impotence of the regime, the support for the regime, and if the North had been based on the ruling groups, which were by far the minority. Emefiena. Now, according to Emefiena, right, in his book, he also believed that dissatisfaction or people not being happy with the government or the regime of Tafawa Balewa was not just from the South, that even majority of people from the North was feeling the same way because the whole country was in turmoil, nothing was working. Now, these are who the British preferred to rule the country, people that, or somebody that could not run the government, howbeit with no experience. He was the first person to be the prime minister, so you could understand. But why not give it to somebody like Nnamdi Azikiwe, who gave us independence, and they just made him a ceremonial head of state or a ceremonial governor general or something. Meanwhile, giving Tafawa Balewa the prime minister then. So that was the thinking of majority of Nigerians then. Though Emefiena admits that a large number of people from the North were tired of Balewa's government, it remained that Balewa's government was still seen to be pro-North from his statement. It seems the major explanation why they ended the First Republic the way they did was to restore law and order, fight corruption, and bring back Nigeria en route to genuine development and progress, according to Ademoyega 2004. Now, Major Ademoyega was the only Yoruba man, or the only Yoruba major that was part of the 6 people that plotted the coup. Now, you need to also understand the hierarchy of military. So military, we have majors, and then you have other ranks, right? Now, under the ranks, there were other people from other ethnicity that joined in the coup. In fact, according to Kaduna Nzogu, he didn't have to say anything. He was a trainer, so he had soldiers under them. All he needed to do, he said, even the Northerners had guns, and he didn't have anything. He didn't even have to shoot. So all he did was command them, as a military trainer. Now, Ademoyega was also a Yoruba man who participated in the coup. He wrote a book that he released in 2004. And in that book, he also confirmed that the reason why they plotted that first coup of 1966 was that they wanted to restore law and order. It is good for us to know our history, so we'll not be hating people unnecessarily. I don't see where this is pinned against Igbos being tribalistic or being evil. If a Yoruba man that was part of the people that plotted the coup wrote a book to confirm that the reason for the coup was not because they wanted to enthrone Agui Ironsi. In fact, Agui Ironsi was also marked to be killed. They wanted to release Awolowo, which I will read further in the book. So why then do we call it an Igbo coup? Now, if in his book, Ademoyega in 2004, clearly stated that they wanted to restore law and order, fight corruption, and bring back Nigeria en route to genuine development and progress. Why then do we call it an Igbo coup? Why then do we call it an Igbo coup? Oh my God, my phone is even about to die. So, the facts are there. It's just for us to, either do we decide to, to listen to it or believe it, or we don't. Now, it has also been shown that the revolutionaries wanted to make Obafemi Awolowo, a non-Igbo, the head of the Nigerian government. Right? It has also been shown. So, also, the plotters of the coup said that what they also wanted to achieve was to make Obafemi Awolowo, who was then in prison by Tafawa Balewa. So they wanted to carry out the coup and kill all these people and also go and release Awolowo from the prison and make him the prime minister. And Awolowo is not an Igbo man, but he was put in prison in Calabar in the eastern part of the country. Do you understand? So if that was the plot, a Yoruba man is saying that they wanted to go and release a Yoruba man, why then is this called an Igbo coup? Why then is Igbos hated for something they didn't do? The problem was in Yoruba land. A Yoruba man participated in the coup, said the reason was to restore law and order and also release a Yoruba man. So why then do Igbos get the brunt of all this? And people carry on the hate without knowing that it was even Igbos who are more Nigerian than any other person. Now, let's continue. It was also shown that the revolutionaries wanted to make Obafemi Awolowo a non-Igbo the head of the Nigerian government. For Okocha, another writer, in 1994, the main objective of the coup was to release a prisoner and install him as the Prime Minister of Nigeria, page 34. Now, another writer called Okocha, in 1994, confirmed the same thing in his own book, that the main objective why those 6 military guys planted the coup was to release a prisoner. He didn't mention the name, according to him, and install him as Prime Minister of Nigeria. The prisoner, okay, now he mentioned his name. The prisoner was Obafemi Awolowo, as the coup plotters believed that Nigeria needed the services of Jeremiah Obafemi Awolowo, according to the book written by Okocha in 1994, page 35. Now, it is very important that Nigerian youth learn the history and stop the hate against Igbos. Because we growing up and seeing the hate against us, we keep asking, what is really the problem? Yes, Igbo names were mentioned, but the reason was to restore order, that the whole West already was in anarchy. And Yoruba was part of that plot. Now, people will excuse the Yoruba and make an argument that it was an Igbo coup. Meanwhile, these guys fought on your side to restore peace on your region and bring out your president, who was Awolowo, and make him the prime minister. How then is it an Igbo coup? Not one writer, not two writers, not three writers, not four writers confirmed the same thing. Now, follow me. This is why I said go and get this comprehensive history work by this guy that wrote this book. Now, he said, Ifajna in 1966 testifies to this. We also believe that Chief Obafemi Awolowo had become recognized as the rallying point of our nation. For him, therefore, we had the post of executive president or prime minister, depending on the reaction of the general. So they didn't even know if he will accept or if he will not accept. But all they knew is that they want to go and release Awolowo, right? Jeremiah Obafemi Awolowo. They wanted to go and release him. We plan to bring him into Lagos by air before noon on the 15th of January. If in the end he refused, he was to be held and decrees made were to be issued in his name. Page 75. So this is where the coup plotters are confirming that they wanted to not just go to the north and kill Michael, go to the east and kill Michael Obara and release him from prison. They were supposed to bring him to Lagos, install him. Even if he doesn't want to be installed, they will make decrees in his name. And this is written by Ifajna, the originator of the coup. So why are Igbos hated in Nigeria, for Christ's sake? The same people fighting for Nigeria to be one, fighting for Nigeria to be good, fighting for Nigeria to be fine. The same people after the war going to every part of Nigeria, building homes, building businesses, establishing their wealth. It's very, 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 very dangerous for you to fight a man that really loves you so much and then run to your enemies. I'm coming to my own point. Let me continue reading the book. Ifajna's statement is corroborated by Awolowo's former secretary, Now, the book written by Emefiena, his claim in his book, was collaborated by Awolowo's former secretary. Remember, Awolowo was in prison. Now, Odia Ofi-Imam, who spoke to the Guardian newspaper on the 20th anniversary of the death of Awolowo in 2007. This guy called Odia Ofenom was the former secretary of Awolowo. Now, he confirmed in the 20th anniversary of the death of Awolowo, which is in 2007, most recently. He said, people were told that it was an Igbo coup, but that is not correct. You see? They said it was an Igbo coup, but it was not correct. It is very interesting part of the Nigerian story. In the first place, there have been many serious lies that have been told by our leaders in the last 45 years of Nigeria's history. Our leaders have not been bold enough to tell us the truth. This is why people have been fed with lies to hate Igbos for reasons best known to them. This guy is confirming it. Odia Ifemiam. I don't know which part of the country that names come from, but I don't think it's an Igbo man. Now he's saying that the leaders of Nigeria have been lying to Nigeria purposely for the last 45 years. Now he says the interesting part of the Nigerian story and the Awolowo story would have been explained in the book written by Chukwuma Emefiena. He confirmed and corroborated what Emefiena wrote in his book. Remember, Emefiena wrote in his book in 1966. Emefiena wrote his book in 1966, just what do you call it? Just when did the war? Hold on. Emefiena cannot write his book in 1966 when the war. Okay, yes. The coup started in 1966, but the civil war started in 1967. So Emefiena has already written his book, but yet the war started in 1957. And I know why that happened now, but I will explain later. Now he says, so this former secretary of Awolowo confirmed what Emefiena wrote in his book, but then he says it would have been clearer what actually happened. The book said the plan of the coup makers was to release Awolowo from jail and make their own leader. If that book had been published earlier, the story that it was an Igbo coup would have been debunked and it would have been a different ball game. You see what this man said? So this man said, had it been that those people, that book by Emefiena on why they carried out the coup, had it been it was published earlier, it was published in 1966, but had it been it was published earlier, maybe Nigeria will not wage war against the Igbos. Because the whole plan or the whole plot was to go and release a Yoruba man. And funny enough, Yorubas, some fought on Nigerian side, some fought on Biafran side. There was one colonel called Colonel Banjo. He's from Yoruba. He was the one that led the Biafran war all through Benin, even up to Ore, before he stopped and then went back. Right? Now, the book referred to by Odia Ifemiam happens to be the one that has been severally quoted in this work. So the same book that has been quoted in this work is the same work that Odia, who was the former secretary to Awolowo, confirmed. The manuscript indictment, right? So it was in the manuscript. They later published it, but they published it late. And that's why the war was, the war happened eventually. Because had it been they got that book early, they would have known that actually wasn't an Igbo coup, as they were suggested. But that suggestion came from a British. That's why I said everybody have interest. Unfortunately, the situation that Nigeria finds itself today benefits the British for us not to have peace among ourselves, because they planted hate, which is the divide and rule, and we hated the Igbos, who actually was fighting for the unity of the country. But anyway, I've said it now anyway. Now, the manuscript indictment was stumbled upon during the course of this research. Beside this manuscript, a large amount of literature support the theory that Emefiena and Zogo military intervention was in essence and by design to save Nigeria, particularly the West, which was being planned to be walloped as the army under Brigadier Mai Malali had been authorized to draw a plan for the complete subjugation of the West starting from January 17, 1966, according to the book Oyeweso, which was written in 1992, page 21. So before they even found the manuscript by Ifajna when they were researching, right? Many people have written books confirming that already the North under Tafawa Balewa have already given clear instructions to Brigadier Mai Malali or Mai Malami. Yeah, how do you pronounce his name? Mai Malali, right? To carry out complete subjugation of the Western region, which was then becoming a problem for the federal government, headed by the North. That is according to this work, right? And he was already told to, he was authorized to plan, to draw a plan for the complete subjugation, according to the writer called Oyeweso. He wrote his book in 1992, page 21. Now, Ifajna and Nzogu were aware of the plot. Remember, Igbos were highly placed in the military then. So Ifajna and Nzogu were aware of the plot and they acted without delay to thwart it. So Ifajna and Kaduna Nzogu were trying to save the Yorubas from the North. Unfortunately, the Yorubas today in Lagos are showing more hatred for the Igbos than they are showing love. Meanwhile, the coup plotters, and that's why they had a Yoruba in the plotters. That's why Adeboyega was actually one of them. They were trying to save the West from the hands of the North. Under Brigadier Mai Malari, who was planning to go and subjugate all of them. And these guys are good when it comes to military. Anyway, go and get this book and read it yourself. Or you read Oyeweso's book. Now, Ifajna and Nzogu were aware of the plot and they acted without delay to thwart it. It was most probably to minimize the shedding of blood that a fractioner of the Nigerian army struck on January 15, 1966, according to Oyeweso 1992 book, page 21. In the words of one of the key players, Nzogu, in Ndubisi 2003. Now, another writer called Ndubisi in 2003, he says, the aim of the Revolutionary Council is to establish a strong unity and prosperous nation. Right? So according to this writer, his name is called Ndubisi, in 2003, he released a book and he says the aim of the Revolutionary Council was to establish a strong, united and prosperous nation. Still talking about the plotters, because what they called it was a revolution. That they wanted to deliver a strong and prosperous nation. Nowhere was an Igbo agenda mentioned. Aguiyi-Ironsi, which later became the head of state, was not planned to be the head of state. It wasn't their intention. And this is another writer. Now, free from corruption and internal strife. Now, on why he surrendered to Ironsi, he said, our purpose was to change our country and make it a place we could be proud of. We could be proud to call our home, not to wage war. According to Ndubisi's book in 2003, page 8. So, now, the writer now says, the trio, Ifajna, Nzogu, and Ademoyega, having reviewed the political events in the country, came to the conclusion that a military takeover of government was the only remedy to the country's numerous ills. According to Oyeweso's book, 1992, page 26, Maduebo's book, 1980, and Adeboyega's book, 2004. All confirming that the reason why these 6 coup plotters plotted the coup of 15 January 1966 was to, remedy the country of the numerous ills that the country was going through. The numerous issues happening in the Nigerian country, which was the corruption, the anarchy in the West, the TV riots, and all of that. East was peaceful. The whole of eastern part of Nigeria was peaceful. There was no issue. Yet, it was the East that was targeted. Of course, caused by the British. But let's continue. If the major players in the first Nigerian coup made it clear why they struck, scholastic reference to Igbo coup seems unattainable, bearing in mind also that the entire people and press hailed the change with absolute joy and optimism for the emergence of a new Nigeria free from corruption, tribalism, and nepotism. Therefore, when people argue nowadays that Eastern Nigeria was massacred in retaliation for the role of the January coup, it sounds ridiculous. Maduebo 1980, page 27. So according to Maduebo's book, after the coup happened, although it failed to an extent, it failed in the East, right? They were not able to kill Michael Okpara, and also not even Zik Aguiyi who was in Lagos, right? But there were still jubilation. Some people were even happy that at least the key players that were causing the problem were no more. Whether rightly or wrongly, but that was the case. They were happy for the emergence of a new Nigeria. So I'll read that again. If the major players of the first Nigerian coup made it clear why they struck, scholastic reference of Igbo coup seems unattainable, bearing in mind also that the entire people and press hailed the change with absolute joy and optimism for the emergence of a new Nigeria, free from corruption, tribalism, and nepotism. So they were happy that there is change of power, which is what they were clamoring for anyway, right? And therefore, why people argue nowadays that the Eastern Nigerians were massacred in retaliation for the role in January coup, it sounds ridiculous. So why then are people happy and saying that the civil war was because of the coup? It wasn't because of the coup. The coup was responding to the anarchy in the West and the TV riots and the corruption of Tafawa Balewa and his inability to resolve the issue. Now, the civil war and the declaration of Biafra was because of another chain of events introduced by the British, who told them, can't you see that they are killing your northern leaders and their own leaders were not killed? That was what they listened to. And they didn't stay in the military or the political side. They now went to the civilian and started killing the civilian, which led to Ojukwu declaring the Biafran state. And that's if you read further in this book. Now, the Igbo coup assumption loses credibility also with Nzogu in Siolum himself, pointing out that the northern soldiers accompanying him had the chance to drop out. So even Kaduna Nzogu, when he was carrying out the rule, with northern people, was northerners, northern soldiers, and they were the ones carrying weapon. Him, Nzogu, as the master, as the leader of the coup, he wasn't even carrying weapon, according to what he wrote. He says, more than that, they had bullets. They had been issued bullets, but I was unarmed. If they disagreed, they could have shot me. Most of the other ranks were northerners, but they followed. So Nzogu is the one that I think that killed the Sultan of Sokoto, Ahmadu Bello, who was the highest guy in the north then. Now he's saying that it wasn't him himself that killed. He was like unarmed. It was the northerners that had the gun that actually went to kill their leader. So if they did not agree, if they were not buying into the idea that they needed to kill the man, that he was corrupt, they wouldn't have killed him. So I don't understand all this concept of Igbo coup. Where is it coming from? There was nothing tribalistic about it. Kaduna Nzogu led, it was Ifeajuna's idea. But it wasn't that these guys, they were majors. They had soldiers under them. And the soldiers were in the north because, what's his name? Kaduna Nzogu was in the north. That's where all the barracks were. So where the NCA, military barracks, everything was in the north. The British built everything in the north. Kaduna, Kano, and Zaria. They had only one barracks in Enugu. So how possible is it that he will be the one? And then people are calling it an Igbo coup, when the people that carried out the actual action, according to him, were northerners. Now, among the prominent northern soldiers that helped Nzogu to overthrow the northern region's government was John Atom Bella. He even mentioned one of the names that was most prominent. Okay. Now, Major Emmanuel Ifeajuna, the architect of the coup, outlined in the highlighted text below the reasons why they stuck. Sorry, bear with me. Let me on my light. So Emefiena also said he highlighted in his text. So what this writer did was to copy from Emefiana's book and paste it here on why they stuck, on why they struck. Now, on the state of Nigeria before January 15, 1966 coup and why they stuck, extracts from Major Emefiana's 1966 indictment, right? The scene had become so corrupt and confused that while an official could be sacked, it is rumored that he talked to a girlfriend of a minister or official. He could lose thousands of pounds without a query being issued him to answer. So, you know, he was saying that Nigeria at the time, there was so much corruption that even an officer can be sacked if the girlfriend, you know, is rumored to, so say for example, an officer talked to the girlfriend of a minister, that's it, you'll be sacked. You know, he could lose thousands of pounds without being queried, without being issued him to answer. So it was as if the corruption was so much that even the girlfriend of an officer can get you sacked and you will lose money. That was the level of corruption they were dealing with at those times, according to Emefiana's indictment. Now, so we kept asking ourselves, where lay our salvation? How could a structure be so diseased? You see the situation of Nigeria then, that these young soldiers was asking themselves this question. Why would a structure be so diseased? Corruption and inefficiencies were not only visible everywhere, they were accepted as a way of life. So Nigeria's corruption did not start today. It's endemic. It started from the time of Nigeria's, just after the British left. Now, I don't understand whether we should even blame that on the British or blame that on ourselves. And I think we should blame it on ourselves. Because this time, it wasn't the British running this thing. It was us. We are the ones in power. And we choose to be corrupt. Right? Now, politics has become the best paying profession. As at then. Then there were the good times, women, the camp followers. Then there were the good time women, the camp followers. I don't know what that means. An incompetent secretary could get appointed on a fabulous pay with the quarters as a matter of priority because she knew some minister or alaji. So the same thing that you understand that he's doing today. So anybody that's incompetent, because he knows an allergy, because of who you know, he will become a minister. These are the things that triggered these people to carry out the coup. Now, they went around openly offering themselves for trade for the highest bidder, for any job. So women were getting jobs just by sleeping around. Now, when corruption was criticized, more corruption appeared. The more they were trying to criticize the corruption, the things were getting worse in the Nigerian government. Now, when it was said that salaries were too high for a particular group, like the registrations, who met only 64 days in a year, then legislations, all these Senate people, they meet only 64 years in a whole 365 days. So the length of the 300 days, they were like doing other things or doing whatever they like. They only meet 64 days, but the money they were paying them was very high then. So, even in today's Nigeria, you will see similarities with the stories that these people were telling us at 1960. You can just almost understand that they are not lying. They were telling you what is still obtainable in today's system, because actually the stronghold holding Nigeria has not changed since then till now. Now, so the legislators were earning a lot of money. Now their salaries would be raised. So they will raise their salaries. When people cried that there were too many ministers, they would appoint some more. Almost the same thing that Tinubu is doing. Today we have 50 ministers, 50 ministries. As of today now, they've created another ministry for livestock. That was what Emefiena then were complaining. So when they complain of legislators earning more money, they will increase their money. When they complain that ministries were too much, they will increase the number of ministries. Just being insensitive to the people. That's exactly what led them to actually carry out the coup then. So they would appoint some more. On 14th January, the eve of the coup, more ministers were appointed. Just imagine, 14th of January, a night before the coup, which took place on the 15th of January, they appointed more ministers. Okay? Now, they used the army to terrorize the population. Wow. They were using the army to terrorize the population. They prostituted the military institution, which would be sacred to our people. And they expected that we should go on slaughtering our own people for a few criminals to stay in power forever. So they were using military people to go and kill people they don't like. These are the things that, you know, if you hear the word corruption, it is when they distill it down like this, you understand exactly what was the corruption. So ladies were having their way, people were doing all sorts, they can sack officers, they were using military for their own personal gains and, you know, their own personal agendas and killing people. So military saw that they were killing their own people. Do you understand? Now, by 1945, our people would say, I am a Nigerian, I come from Kanu. But by 1960, they would say, I am a Northerner, I come from Kanu. So that sense of being a Nigerian started leaving the polity. Do you understand? Because the Northerners were becoming emboldened. It is important to say that this whole thing was happening under Tafawa Balewa. So the North, actually, the corruption in the North even triggered these people. They became so angry because the Northerners were just doing anything they like. Having the backing of the British people, the oil money was coming. They were just enjoying life, doing whatever they like. That is what Emefiena was writing in his book, The Indictment. Yeah. Now, so events in Nigeria drifted. Those who would have directed the affairs of the state left the destiny of our people on the course of events, and people started to lose hope even in God. Nigerian people were losing hope, just like we're in the same situation with Tinubu today. Nobody has hope. Nobody knows what to do. Do you understand? They would ask themselves, is it not unlucky to be a Nigerian? You see? Is it not unlucky to be a Nigerian? These are the questions they ask, and we're still asking to ourselves today. Because we've not resolved our issue. The issue is still there. It is quite ironical that the motto of the country reads unity and faith. Unity, yes, we would watch together, but faith? Faith in what or whom? Good question. In what could Nigerians repose faith in their country as ruled by the rotten regime? The rotten regime meaning the regime of Tafawa Balewa. Now, was it in the thugs who operated and charaded the street in full view and often with the cooperation of the police? Was it in the corrupt politicians? If faith meant faith in God, then it was appropriate. If it meant that by some justice, those who did evil would pay for it away. It meant that by some justice, those who did evil will pay for it straight away. That is if the faith means faith in God. That is our motto, unity and faith. Now, we fully realize that to be caught planning, let alone acting on our lines, was high treason. So now, Emefiena is saying that when they were planning the coup, if they were caught, it's treated as high treason, not just treason or treasonable felony. It was high treason. Now, he's not talking about how they planned the coup. We fully realize that to be caught planning, let alone acting on those lines, was high treason, and the penalty for high treason is death. We knew we were well aware for our actions. We were well aware of the consequences. We could not leave 55 million to live in the ever-present chaos caused by a bunch of hooligans, and we believe we were right. They are now reminiscing, and they are saying that they believe they were right to carry out the coup. So Nigeria, the population of Nigeria then was 55 million. As at 1962 census, they pegged Nigeria's number at 55 million. Now, what these guys, these young soldiers, these majors thought to themselves was, these hooligans are just having their way and looting the whole people dry. So are they going to sit around and wait for God? You know, and they knew that they could die if they are found planning. It was a treasonable felony. It's the highest treason, and it's considered as death, the capital punishment for that. So they decided to act. Now, For a time, an army may obey a bad leader blindly, but if the army is worth the name, then the civilian elected leader must watch what he does with power, what he does with and to his people. The duty of the army is not just to protect a government, it is to protect a government insofar as that government interests are those of the nation. So what he's saying is that if an army man or an army officer knows what he's doing, he could obey a government, but he knows that he should obey a government if the government is actually doing what it's supposed to do to the nation, to his people, not just blindly obeying government when they're actually doing the opposite of what they should do. That's what his belief is, right? Now, he says, a soldier has the right to protect a nation from the mischief of an irresponsible government. That's their thought process, yeah? A soldier has the right a soldier's first duty is to his people, to his nation. They believe that the soldier's first duty is to his people. Now, it is also worth mentioning at this juncture that most of these guys were trained in the UK. This first set of these military boys were... So even Buhari, most of them, they fly them first of all to Sandhurst here in the UK to come and give them military training. When they finish, they perform well on the exam and whatever, they then fly them back to Nigeria. So most of them, when you listen to them speak even English, they speak perfect dictions, like they speak perfect King's English. So their training was abroad. This first set of Nigerians, the Ahmadu Bellos, the Ojukus, the Awolowos, if you listen to them, you will see that they are well trained. They were trained by Oyibo in the UK. They enjoyed UK. They enjoyed abroad. Then, that's when you join the army, you come here for training. When you finish training, you come back. Do you understand? Also, there are soldiers that were employed in Nigeria, all of that, are recruited in Nigeria. But this person, the likes of the Ifajunas and the rest, the Maduebos, they are the ones that came, according to Maduebo himself, he was saying that there were only 8 people trained in the Nigerian military, but before him, Maduebo got one, Ojuku, all these guys were trained in the UK. So it's imperative for us to understand that. Now, so these soldiers were trained by the UK to understand that the service of a soldier, even though it is to the government, but it was also to the people. And the government and the people supposed to align in purpose. Now, he says a soldier's first duty is to his people, to his nation, right? It does not mean that one has to disobey the government or his commanders, yeah? But when it comes to a critical stage of doubt, which is rare in the life of a nation, then one has to think of his country first. Government and individuals can come and go. The nation stays and forever. Napoleon once told his soldiers, put the country first and you cannot be wrong. This is the mentality, the intelligence of Ifajuna and co. at the time. They understood their duty. Now the question is, the soldiers of today, the police of today, do they even understand that they have a duty to the people? I'm not saying go and carry out coups, no. But they understand that in rare situations, they had to do that. But most times, you have a duty to the people who you swore to protect. I just love this guy, their level of intellect. He says, while our people were fighting and dying, those who ruled in Lagos and Kaduna and had but to say a word or raise a finger, and peace as well as justice would return, merely looked on. Sorry, I'm not reading it properly. It says, while our people were fighting and dying, those who ruled in Lagos and Kaduna and had but to say one word or raise a finger, and peace as well as justice would return, merely looked on. So what he was saying in essence is that the central government and the federal government, or the western government and the northern government, which is Kaduna and Lagos, who, if they just raise a finger or say a word, justice will return, peace will return. They didn't do anything. They just looked on. It was like back when everything was just going wrong and everybody was okay with it. Now, it did not matter much to them that the countryside was aflame with rage and violence. So, referring to what was happening in the western region, which is the Yorubas, right? It did not matter to them that the countryside was aflame with rage and violence. The last act of the regime was an epitaph befitting their bankruptcy. The cabinet was enlarged to include more ineffective people. And what these things is like, when people start prognosing that you guys are stealing money, you then bring them in, include them in the stealing, thereby expanding the number of ministries. So instead of dealing with the corruption issue, because they know they were neck deep into the corruption, all of them were just including more people that will ask more questions just for them to be roped in and continue to steal. That was the problem, right? So that is what Emefiena was addressing in this indictment. On the last day of the regime, the ex-prime minister granted a press interview in which he virtually admitted he could not control the affairs of the state. So Tafawa Balewa said they cannot control the affairs of the state. Never was such dereliction of duty practiced upon a people by their own leader. How can a leader, howbeit yes the first and inexperienced, come out and say I cannot control the affair of the nation when you have the military there? It's like you don't know how to use your military to quell the issue. So the Yoruba land was like going, into flames, and there's anarchy and everything, and you are busy coming on TV to come and announce that you couldn't solve the issue. This is what gave rise to these boys taking matters into their hand, right? Now, we had waited enough. This was a day before the coup, that Tafawa Balewa said. He said, we have waited enough. Here at last was the challenge at our feet. We heard them challenge us to stand up for our people or fall spine with them, and their voices kept ringing in our ears, calling us to emergency action. We could not stop. So, reading Efeana's write-up, you can see that almost that their hands were forced to take action. Because Tafawa Balewa, who was the leader then, the prime minister, said he couldn't do anything. So he showed weakness. And the people were calling for law and order, that these things are too much. It was like Nigeria was a mess. It was a chaos. Do you understand? So these guys had to take the bull by the horn here. In addition to Zogo and Efeana's respective narratives regarding to the rationale behind their coup, is also Why We Struck, written by Ademoyega. So the book written by Ademoyega, the Yoruba guy that was part of the coup, is called Why We Struck. One of the planners of the coup. None of these principal plotters of the coup has in any way shown any slighted hint that the coup they planned and executed had either the Igbo political or military leading elite behind it. Why then do we call it an Igbo coup? Why then do we hate Igbo so much? 30,000 to 50,000 Igbos were killed in the north. Civilians shot and killed anyhow. Just because they claimed that they lost their leaders. But the people that planned the coup said, and this is a Yoruba man, he wrote a book, Why We Struck. Go and find that book and read it. He was part of the plotters. He said, no Igbo politician or military ranking officer. So Agui Ironsi was not part of the coup. Maduebo was not part of the coup. Ojukwu was not part of the coup. They were all majors. They were not brigadier. They were not colonel. They were not the lead. They were not the head. They were not part of the coup. In fact, they killed one Igbo man called Colonel Unyebwe in Lagos. So why do we hate Igbos so much? Igbos cannot be trusted. Igbos destroyed Nigeria. Igbos caused the problem in Nigeria. Meanwhile, the writer said it wasn't. It's good for us to know our history. Oh God, where did I stop? Okay, I'm going to read that again. It says, none of these principal plotters of the coup has in any way shown any slighted hint that the coup they planned and executed had either the Igbo political or military leading elite behind it. Instead, historical evidence seemed to point to the contrary. It was the combined efforts of the Igbo army officers, Agui Ironsi, Alex Maduebo, and Emeka Ojukwu, who used the situation created by Colonel Unebu's non-cooperation in Lagos to foil the coup, Maduebo 1980. So how they actually got to know about the coup was through Colonel Unebu. This Colonel Unebu is an Igbo man who was in charge of the armory in Lagos. He refused to give them the key to where the guns and everything was kept. These young soldiers killed him. He was an Igbo man. It wasn't part of the coup. It was that killing of Unwebe that Ojukwu now used, and if you read Maduebo's book, it explains it perfectly well. Ojukwu now called Agui Ironsi to tell him what is happening in Lagos, and they were also fearing for their own lives. And Maduebo as well was asked to go and see Ojukwu, but he was also scared for them not to kill him. But they managed to foil the attacks. So the attacks failed some part of Lagos, which why they didn't kill Agui Ironsi, and also they tipped off Obara in the east. Now Obara had a visitor, so they didn't want to kill Obara in front of the visitor. That's why they didn't kill Obara. But Obara was already tipped. He made a way. And also Agui Ironsi was tipped. Agui Ironsi escaped it. But it was Unwebe's effort of refusing to give them the weapon, Ojukwu's information, and Maduebo's cause. If you read Maduebo's book, he was the general command, he was the armory, the man in charge of the armory in the north then. They managed to open the armory. So he said he woke up, went there, and saw that things have already started happening. He didn't understand what was going on. So for his own life, because those soldiers can kill you, they asked him a question. Are you with us or against us? He just, at that point, played smart. Otherwise, he would have killed him there. And then he called Ojukwu. Then him and Ojukwu intelligently spoke to each other. Nobody want to say, definitely whether they are part of it or not, to avoid themselves being killed. But they tipped off Agui Ironsi and Michael Obara. That's what saved those guys. But that does not mean that it was an Igbo coup and thereby they didn't kill themselves, their own people. No. It was because the coup failed. Because in coup, everything's supposed to happen simultaneously. But when people get tipped off, even 1 minute is important in a coup. When people get tipped off, they can run away and the coup will fail. So that's what happened there. Right? Now, Colonel Unwebe himself paid with his life for his non-cooperation. Colonel Joseph Achuzie debunked the Igbo coup hypothesis by highlighting the major role played by Emeka Ojukwu, which helped to thwart the coup. So Emeka Ojukwu played a role that helped to thwart the coup. The same Ojukwu that led Biafra was also in the north, in Kanu. Maduebo was in Kaduna. Do you understand? Now, these are the people that made sure that that coup didn't carry on successfully to the end. Although some people already have fallen because it came unbeknownst to them. But the same Ojukwu that was now being blamed at the time was part of the people to foil it. Also confirming it was Colonel Achuzie in his own write-up as well. Right? He debunked it. Now, he says, if it wasn't for Ojukwu and the role he played, the North would have been the battleground because Nzogu was holding the North and the army firmly in his hands, and the North could have been the battleground. But that aspect of Ojukwu's action, which favored the people, who are now saying he caused the war, if he didn't take the steps he did, the story would have been different. The people who should be criticizing Ojukwu are the Igbo because every Igbo man, knowing the Northerners, were happy with the situation when the first coup took place. Do you understand? That is Achuzie's report. One Igbo man was carrying out the coup, another Igbo man stopped it. Right? An Igbo man from Kanu. And another Igbo man from Kanu. Now, bear in mind that most of these Igbo men then in military were all born and bred in the North. They spoke Hausa fluently. They were in the military because those days military was not popular. But these guys were in the military. Now, what is important is, why then do we call it an Igbo coup? If an Igbo man helped stop it and a Yoruba man was part of it, and they were supposed to go and erase a Yoruba man from the eastern part of the country. So let us understand it. As far as it was, there were events leading up to it. Now, at this stage, it seems important to look at the first coup in Nigeria vis-a-vis other coups that have taken place in the country. Most probably the political circumstances which informed the subsequent coups in Nigeria, led by Gowon. Now, there are subsequent coups in Nigeria. Number one, led by Gowon. You have to also understand that Gowon also led the coup that killed Agui Ironsi. Because after these coup plotters were thwarted, the coup failed. Nzogu, Ifajuna, Ademoyega, all of these guys were held and put in prison. Then Agui Ironsi, who was the second in command, took over the head of the prime minister. Right? He lasted only 6 months before he was killed. And it's also worth noting that he was killed when he went to see his friend Fajuyi, a Yoruba man. And the Yoruba man said, I would not allow you to kill Agironsi. He's my trusted brother. And said, if you have to kill him, you have to kill me. They killed both Fajuyi and Agironsi. So at some point, Yorubas understood that Igbos were on their side, and at the same time, so Yorubas was on the Nigerian side. So it's like dicey. Do you understand? So that is an important point to note, that Fajuyi also gave his life for his Igbo friend and confidant Agironsi. Do you understand? But Gowon carried that kill. He killed also a head of state. Now, while he's justifying himself of fighting on Nigerian side against Biafra, he also carried out a coup, which some people are arguing. He also killed also a Nigerian president or a Nigerian head of state, which was Agironsi. This Gowon. And it's not just Gowon. Mohamed Murtala Mohammed also carried out a coup. Dimka carried out a coup. This Buhari that you see now, also carried out a coup against Dimka. Babangida carried out a coup. Oka carried out a coup. All these people were comparatively less serious than the political circumstances which explained the 15 January 1966 coup. So all the other subsequent coups were personal reasons. They killed the president just so they can be president themselves. Yes, yet the coup that was not supposed to be, I'm killing the president so I will become president, was the one that people tagged as an Igbo coup and the hatred against Igbos. Whereas the other coups that happened in Nigeria, which was people just trying to force themselves to be presidents under military rule, were not seen as any evil. And they were not called a tribalistic move by whoever carried it. So it is not sensible at all. Now, unlike the Ifeanyi Nzogu-led coup of 15 January 1966, none of these later coups had been associated with the ethnic origin of the principal plotters. So, the Gowon coup was not called a TV coup. The Murtala Mohammed coup was not called a northern coup. The Dimka coup was not called a northern coup. I don't even know where Dimka is from. Buhari school was not called a Fulani coup. Babangida school was not called a Fulani coup. And Oka school was not called a TV coup. So why was the coup by Nzogu and Ifeanyi and Adeboyega called an Igbo coup? When there are two tribes that participated in that coup, and an Igbo man was killed, and an Igbo man foiled it. Now, from the ethnic consideration of the alleged Igbo coup of 15 January 1966 was, for all intents and purposes, a pro-Yoruba coup to the extent he was anti-Igbo coup. So that coup of January 15, 1966 was actually a pro-Yoruba. It was to solve the Yoruba problem, release Awolowo from prison, and throw him as the prime minister, and the Yoruba participated in it. So it was pro-Yoruba and even an anti-Igbo. An Igbo man was killed, two other Igbo men were designated to be killed, and Igbos had nothing to gain from it. Agironsi was meant to be killed. Michael Opera was meant to be killed, even though he wasn't part of the whole construct of Yoruba and the North regional governments. He was in the East. This hypothesis is supported by the following argument. Firstly, the coup was plotted in order to forestall the Yoruba land from being destroyed by the North, as earlier planned. Secondly, the coup plotters agreed to hand over power to the prominent Yoruba politician Obafemi Awolowo. Some commentators argued that the 15 January 1966 coup was structurally anti-Igbo because it dismissed an Igbo president of the Senate. Now, so some people believe that the coup plotters planned that planned that coup, and it was supposed to be anti-Igbo. Why is it supposed to be anti-Igbo? It was supposed to be anti-Igbo because it would have made it impossible for Agironsi to be head of state after Tafawa Balewa, right? It was also meant to dislodge an Igbo president of the Senate. So an Igbo president then, the Senate had an Igbo president then. And also, an Igbo man was the foreign minister then. And also, an Igbo man was minister of education then. An Igbo man was minister of transport and aviation. So all these people, that coup scattered their plans or scattered their positions. Do you understand? So why then would you call that an Igbo coup if you affected Igbos this much? That is the argument. The coup also dismissed Igbo premiers in 2 of the 4 regions of the Federation. 2 Igbo premiers were of Igbo extraction, but because of that coup, they were dislodged, adding to all these other positions that I mentioned. So how is that an Igbo coup? How was that an Igbo agenda? The end game was to install Chief Obafemi Awolowo, a Yoruba prime minister, according to the book written by Okocha in 1994, page 97. Having noted a number of supporting statements which refuted Igbo coup appellation, how can the Igbo dominance in the composition of the coup plotters be explained? Perhaps why there was more Igbo in the group that carried out the coup is because, as Osahe in 1998 book explained, coup planning and execution involves a closely knit of core officers, and the federal balance does not usually come into play, and consign with balance would be likely to endanger the success of the coup and the lives of the plotters, according to 290. Adeboyega, a Yoruba man, and so a non-Igbo member of the group, most probably met the requirements which enable him to belong to the close-knit core of officers. For this reason, Igbo-ness does not seem to be a benchmark for recruiting into the class of coup plotters, right? So, if you're asking the question, why is the comment section off? So I cannot be distracted. Adora, you have even left. So that's what I'm trying to say. The reason why, why people are saying that it was an Igbo coup, the question was, why did you have, the whole thing against the Igbo people? But at the same time, the Igbos were more in number because coups are planned to be, what do you call it? Planned neatly, like closely, so it won't fail. It's meant to be something that is closely planned. So it's not meant to bring people from every tribe. You don't try to bring federal balance in coups, because if you leak, then it will fail. So these are people that were maybe closely knitted together, and the Yoruba guy was also brought in because he was part of them, or he was part of their group or something like that. If you want to ask me a question, you can ask a question, but I'm not going to allow comments now. Maybe when I finish it, I think I'm almost finishing. Although the thing is a bit long, but I think I'm almost finishing. I can open up for more questions. I'll open up the comment. So this is it. It was not meant to be an Igbo thing. And why you have more Igbos in it was because, they were all friends and they could understand what they want to do. Oh my God, I don't even know where I am again. So for this reason, Igbo-ness does not seem to be a benchmark for recruiting into the class of the coup plotters. If it was, Colonel Ato Unwebe, the quartermaster general, a thoroughbred Igbo patriot who was in charge of the armory in Lagos, should have been co-opted by the Igbo plotters. So why didn't the Igbo man that was killed, that was in charge of the armory in Lagos, his name is Colonel Ato Unwebe. Why didn't they put him? Why didn't they plan with him? Or why didn't they even plan with Maduebo? Or why didn't they plan with Ojukwu? They didn't plan with those people because it's not based on tribe. It's based on people that they could trust themselves. These guys believe that they wanted to change the course of their nation and save their nation from the path was going. So the quartermaster general who was in charge of the armory was not even informed of the coup. Now, instead, he was killed in Lagos for refusing to cooperate with the coup makers who came to him and demanded the keys to the armory, and thus gave his life for Nigeria and his absolute loyalty to the Northern MPC controlled Balewa administration. So an Igbo man died for Nigeria, even when the coup plotters were from most of the coup plotters was from Igbo. So it's nothing to do with tribe. It's nothing to do with tribe. Now, Colonel Unwebe's single act of denying the plotters of the most important means of achieving the objective, arms and ammunition, in the most important place in the country, Lagos, which was then the seat of government, was what finally incapacitated the whole exercise. So because these guys couldn't get weapons in Lagos, that's what actually made this coup to fail, right? Now, before we conclude, this is where the sad part of this whole history started. Now, before we conclude this chapter, it seems pertinent to ask whether the lives of 30,000 to 50,000 Igbo Eastern civilians already killed, according to another author called Kronje, a 1967 book, and Johnson in 2000 book, a book written by Johnson in year 2000, with about 200 Igbo Eastern Army officers, were not enough compensation for the death of the 3 Hausa civilian and 4 army officers killed in the alleged Igbo coup of January 1966, according to a book Ikazo written in 1997, to engage in the further massacre of the same people in September 1967. It may equally be interesting to know the answers to the following question. So now, the writer is now asking the question. Out of the coup, the people from the north that was killed in the coup was 3 Hausa civilians and 4 army, right? 3 Hausa civilians and 4 army officers from the north. Now, for these 7 people, 30,000 to 50,000 Igbo civilians were killed in the north. No Yoruba. A Yoruba man was part of it to release another Yoruba. But now they targeted the Igbos and killed 30,000 to 50,000 of the Igbos. On top of that, extra 200 Igbo army officers was killed for 7 people. For 7 people, they've also killed Agi Ironsi, which was our highest man then, the #1 Igbo man, as far as he was the head of state of Nigeria anyway. He was killed by dragging on the road, him and Fajui from Yoruba. Now, the Yorubas did not fight for him, but at the same time, Igbos were killed on the streets, killed in the shops, killed in the airports, killed everywhere. As if that was not enough, they continued killing even to the east up to September. Do you understand? Now, he mentioned some of the books by Kronje in 1967, books by Johnson in 2000, books by Ikazo in 1997, right? Now, these questions are supposed to be answered. Did the Igbo or Easterners as a people know about or take part in executing the 15 January 1966 coup? Were the Igbos part of it? Were the Igbos aware that they are planning a coup? Why didn't you kill 50,000 of them and 200 of their officers? These were military guys. What concerned the Eastern region? The Eastern region was peaceful under Michael Okpara. This was the issue we had in the country was in the west and the north. So what concerned the Igbos? Did the Igbo or Eastern commit mass murder on the 15th January of 1966 or thereafter? Did any Igbo man kill any Hausa man or any Yoruba man in the East? Why did 30,000 to 50,000 of people being killed? Now, what was the justification of the spasmodic mass killing of the people of Eastern region since the Hausa counter coup plotters on 29th of July 1966 avenged with the killing of hundreds of Igbo and other Eastern Army officers, including Agi Ironsi, the highest ranking army officer? Just what I just said. Why then started killing Igbos anyhow when already you've killed Agi Ironsi, who was Igbo's highest ranking army officer? Then why did the Yoruba civil and military elites not avenge the murder of their son, Red Colonel Francis Adekunle Fajuyi, just as the Hausa Fulani did? Fajuyi, who was playing host to Ironsi during his capture, was a courageous and trustworthy Yoruba friend of Ironsi who opted to die with Ironsi rather than betray him. Also, the Yorubas lost Fajuyi, Adekunle Fajuyi, Ironsi was warned, Agi Ironsi was warned from all quarters that there was a counter coup, that the North, who was already planning under Brigadier Mai Malami to finish and subjugate the Yorubas, were still coming. They warned Agi, Agi said no. He went there, stayed with Fajuyi, they killed Fajuyi. Now the question the writer is asking is, why didn't the Yorubas avenge him? So just the same way the Hausas felt like they need to avenge the 7 people that died from the north, what of the Yorubas that were killed? Why didn't they avenge? You see? Just some people being bloodthirsty. They just wanted to be killing Igbos, just be wasting Igbos' lives. You also killed from the Yorubas, they didn't avenge. So why did the Hausas or the Northerners feel like they need to avenge the death of these people? Sporadically killing any Igbo person they see indiscriminately. Now, ironically, It was Major General Agi Ironsi and Igbo and other Igbo army officers like Alex Maduebo and Emeka Ojukwu, who used the situation created by Colonel Unuegbe non-cooperation to foil the coup, according to Maduebo's book in 1980. Ndubisi's book in 2003 has it. Emeka Ojukwu, serving in Kanu, had contacted Ironsi in Lagos and invited the Emir of Kanu to make a radio broadcast, thereby nullifying Nzogu's attempt in the north and giving Agi Ironsi the time to rally a counter in Lagos and the west. It was Ojukwu that saved the northerners who were going to kill themselves, because according to Kaduna and Nzogu, the northerners were the ones bearing arms against their own people. He was unarmed. Now, when Ojukwu heard of it, it was Ojukwu that invited the Emir of Kanu to come to the radio. And he was the one that tipped off Agi Ironsi that they are coming to come and kill you. So he called Agi Ironsi and also invited Emir of Kanu. And told Emir of Kanu to announce. That time, Kaduna and Nzogu have already announced in Kaduna. Kaduna and Nzogu have even sent Maduebo to go to make sure that Ojukwu is off. They've killed Ojukwu. When Maduebo called Ojukwu, no, he told Kaduna and Nzogu that he doesn't feel like he should go, that he should send, because already he was not part of the coup and doesn't want to be part of it. So he was intelligently telling them, oh, send a small soldier. Go and read Maduebo's book. He was very honest enough, very objective. Right? So why will Ojukwu foil the coup, saving Agi Ironsi, calling the Emir of Kanu, and yet our northern brothers will say that he was Igbos. Easterners that were peacefully doing business and minding their business were slaughtered all the way from north down. Now the Yorubas didn't get killed, not for Ademo Yoga's participation in the coup, or did they retaliate for Adekunle Fajuyi, their son, being killed by the northerners. And it was an Igbo man that stopped them in Lagos. Otherwise, if they had access to the armory, they would have finished. So I think the Yorubas and also the northerners, instead of hating the Igbos, supposed to be praising the Igbos and loving the Igbos for what they did. Yes, the coup plotters might have acted in their own right, thinking they know what they are doing and it's for the good of Nigeria. But at the same time, it would have been worse. But ultimately, they were punished by killing people who are innocent. And that's the problem. And that was not the intention of the coup. So somehow, the Yorubas were excluded. The Northerners have participated because they have Northern soldiers who carried out the act. And now the plotters were now held to the case and said it was an Igbo coup. For what? Just because Agi Ironsi emerged. But he was the next ranking officer. Now, I'm summarizing. This is the last bit. It says, let me read that again. Emeka Ojukwu, serving in Kanu, had contacted Ironsi in Lagos and invited the Emir of Kanu to make a radio broadcast, thereby nullifying Nzogu's attempt in the north and giving Agi Ironsi the time to rally a counter in Lagos and the west. Page 8. The counter of 15 January 1966, the coup of 15 January 1966, therefore, seemed more of a logical necessity than simply an attempt to dislodge the northern elements who happened to be executive controllers of the incompetent leadership at the center. Ojo, 1997, page 89. So a man called Ojo in his book said that it was a necessity to carry out the 15th January coup. Because of and it was a logical necessity as well. And it was to dislodge the northern elements who happened to be the executive controllers. They were so happy they were dealing with the British, enjoying the largesse, and were so corrupt. And they were the control of the incompetent leadership at the center. Meanwhile, they were planning also to finish the Yorubas, and the coup plotters acted to save the Yorubas. Now, moreover, not killing anybody in the Midwest and especially Eastern Nigeria was a personal regret for Nzogu. Ndubisi 2003, page 8. Now, Nzogu regretted that why then that they didn't kill also in the north, in the east and the Midwest. Because had they killed in the Midwest and the east, nobody would have raised an eyebrow that it was tribal. But that was cool. It failed, right? Now, the paradox in the whole issue was that the Igbo people and other Easterners paid and are continuing to pay heavily for the failed attempt by a few of their brothers in the army who risked their lives to save the Yoruba nation from impending attack by Brigadier Mai Malami and his troops, planning to start in January 17, 1966. The people have also not finished paying Britain the price for championing the cause of Nigeria's independence. However, by foiling the coup, Agu Ironsi, Emeka Ojukwu, and other Igbo army officers have inadvertently and significantly contributed towards the redirection of Nigeria's political and economical history. Probably what Nigeria in today is not what it would have been if the pioneer coup had succeeded. One of the offshoots of the aborted coup was the Nigerian Biafra War, which is the subject of the next chapter. Now, this is where I'm going to stop. If you now want to go and read about the very dark history of the Nigerian Biafra War, you can go and read it. But stopping here is to lay the foundation that please read your history, know your history. Igbos in Nigeria are very special people, and I think this is the reason why God is favoring them, because God knows their heart and their intent, and know that they were not actually doing that coup for tribal purposes, but actually to save Nigeria. Now, they got the worst part of it because that coup failed in the east and the Midwestern region, and thereby giving some people, not even, if you read the book properly, you understand that it was a British man actually that didn't like Agu Ironsi and the role he played in Ivory Coast, right? That actually told started teaching, he was a teacher, that started teaching the Northerners that they were stupid to kill their own people, that Igbos did not kill their own people. He sowed that discord and also made these people to now turn and start killing Igbos, led by a man called Kasira. You know, Kaduna Nzogo actually is born in the north. His real name is Kaduna. According to Maduebo, his real name is Kaduna, not a nickname. And the one that was actually, that took over from Kaduna Nzogo, or that took over the northern part, was called Katsina. So after the war, the government now decided that every region will be led by people from that region. Before that, it was actually anybody could lead. But the military now said, okay, fair enough. Every region will be ruled by people from that region. That's why Ojukwu now, you know, of course, came back to the eastern region, and you know, you had the west and you had the south. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to off the live, and I'm going to restart the live, and I'm going to allow people to come in or join me or make comments. So I want to save this so that I will not have any issues and people can rewatch it earlier, because I'm going to save it on my live. So thank you for listening. A few people have joined me. So when I restart the live, I would like you to have a conversation based on what I've done, and you know, ask your questions and make your contributions. So I will be back shortly. Thank you.